going to hold up my hand and bring myself to the pulpit of truth. I, for one, doubted Lando, not necessarily his ability to be quick at the most important times, but to execute in the most important times. I didn't think, I mean, he only had one job, right, to get it on the podium at the end of Abu Dhabi. But I doubted that Lando Norris had that clutch gene in him. And I mean, his journey over the course of the season, he's said that he doubted himself, his ability to deliver, whether he could be a World Drivers' Champion. Are we looking at a good news story, a positive one that translates into the mainstream zeitgeist then, Peter? Is this does a rising Lando Norris tide float all F1 boats?
Well, it kind of depends on the point at which you're starting your evaluation of Lando Norris. If you've never really rated him and you always thought that he was going to buckle under pressure, I suppose you'll be now thinking, well, at least he got his P3 in Abu Dhabi and he won the championship and he was under pressure and he did that. But if you've been a Lando watcher for a long time, and I'm lucky to count myself in that category, you know that he's super quick, and not max quick, not Charles quick, but still super quick. And you know that, and you know that he's got a beautifully soft, fluid touch, and you know that he's a bit scatterbrained and does a few odd things from time to time and kind of forgets who he is and where he's going. And that's all part of his character. And that's the driver he's been all year. And nothing more, nothing less. And anybody that expected anything more, expected a max to emerge out of Lando, of course was going to be disappointed, because that was never going to happen. And anybody expected him to completely collapse under the pressure of trying to win a championship by finishing third was going to be disappointed, because he is good enough to go out and do that sort of thing. Of course he is. He's a racing driver at the end of the day. And, he loves rallying and he loves driving Rally 1 cars between pine forests. And so he's a serious guy, and he's a good golfer. He's got great timing, great rhythm, as I've always said. So for me, it was just like, yeah, of course, it was a no-brainer he was going to do that in a McLaren. The only thing that was going to maybe take it away would be some sort of reliability issue. And McLaren managed to get through that okay. I'm more of a team thing than anything else there. No, he did a very good job. And yeah, I thought he was, as I said in my video, I think he did a great job with Yuki Tsunoda, actually. I mean, in the crass sort of attempts by Yuki to hold him up, I think Lando was just, two things. One, just the commitment of doing what he did and knowing that he could get away with it, DRS open. And two, doing it with the DRS open, which made it very clear to the stewards that he was taking avoiding action of this guy who was weaving all over the place, and obviously brake tested him. Well, not brake tested him, he came out of the throttle early. And that was, that he just sent all those messages in a millisecond of decision. And I think he did absolutely right. I mean, Lando is never really going to be passing people on the outside. Everybody knows that. He's not that sort of racing driver, is he? But he's totally committed to the inside when he wants to be.
Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Let's double click on that, because this has been the source of much consternation, particularly if you're a Max Verstappen fan. Surely, if you overtake outside of the white lines, if you infringe track limits and gain a durable competitive advantage, where is the 5-second penalty, Peter?
Well, he wasn't overtaking off track. He was avoiding another guy who was doing two things. He was coming out of the throttle unexpectedly early. In other words, brake testing. He took 10 kilometers out of that Red Bull just by coming off the throttle much earlier than he had on previous laps, because Lando was right behind him. So immediately Lando had to dart left, and then he weaved under braking. So, it was 2 counts. So he's lucky not to get a double penalty, in my view. I mean, to me, as I say, I use the word crass, because if you're going to try and hold somebody up in that situation, never try and do it under braking. We all know the rules under braking. We all know how irascible stewards can be if they want to be. So that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, to be honest. I mean, he should, if he wanted to hold up Lando, he should have done it by sort of really nice use of the throttle through turns 2, 3, 4, just slowing him down there a bit and annoying him. And then on the last sector, he should have been doing it there, just coming out, getting on with the power a little bit later, making Lando have to come out of the power a little bit. That's all you can do these days. We all know that. I mean, the problem is, in Yuki's defense, I suppose you got to say that these days, with the whole impeding laws that we have, rules that we have, and the GPS and all the rest of it. These guys have no knowledge or practice in actually how to hold people up, which used to be an art. And now you just, that the only way to do it is the way I described. If you try and do it under braking, I mean, what was he thinking? And I'm slightly curious, well, very curious actually, to know what sort of briefing he got before the race, because it was the usual old thing on the radio about Yuki, Lando's coming up, do what you can, remember what we talked, whatever it was. And he immediately gets back on the radio saying, yeah, I know what to do, leave me alone, sort of thing. Exactly as Isaac Hadjar did in Singapore. Leave me alone, I know what to do. And of course, he didn't know what to do because Lando just blasted straight past him in Singapore. And quite clearly, Yuki didn't know what to do because he completely messed it up. And I'm not talking about the fact that he got a penalty. I mean that he didn't hold up Lando. That was the point. And, he could have got, 30 seconds. Didn't matter, did it, where he was? It was irrelevant. Yeah. But that was never going to hold up Lando. And you just can't do it under braking these days. And so was he poorly briefed? Was he not listening in the briefing? Was he so confident and arrogant that he felt he knew how to do it, even though he's probably never done it in his life before? I mean, if you want to know how to hold somebody up, go and watch Michael Schumacher in the 99 Malaysian Grand Prix with Mika Hakkinen behind him. That's how you hold somebody up without getting any sort of penalty and doing it absolutely. I mean, that was one of the best drives of Michael's career. I wonder whether Yuki Tsunoda did his homework and watched that drive and watched that video before this race, because it was quite clear, where he qualified, that potentially that's what he was going to have to do. But he didn't do it. And maybe you can blame Red Bull and his team for not making him do that and put his nose down, but put his nose into the video. But if you just sack the guy, I suppose he's going to be a bit nonchalant about it all, and maybe you're not going to be paying attention anyway.
Yeah. So
that was a bad time to announce his sacking, because you needed his full cooperation in that race. Not that that made that much difference anyway. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Lando was still going to finish third, wasn't he? He's still going to get the championship, Yuki or no Yuki. But we're specifically talking about that incident. And I come back to Lando making that split-second decision to just go bang off track with the DRS open, making it absolutely clear to the stewards that he was taking avoiding action and not doing an overtake in the established sense of the word. And then the message got straight through. Absolutely brilliant. And I got to give credit also. I don't know who, to McLaren, who was behind him there. Maybe it was Will, I don't know. But, for bearing in mind this is a Red Bull that they're playing with, and how good Red Bull are at arguing with the stewards and getting things to go their way, for McLaren to take that on was very impressive, I thought. The only thing I'd say is that Jonathan Wheatley's not there anymore, so maybe the Red Bull ability to go up and fight with the stewards and persuade them to do what they want to do has gone away with Jonathan Wheatley. Watch out Audi next year is all I can say, because Audi will be doing the same thing, as that Red Bull used to be able to get away with.
It's interesting that you say that, Peter. But I don't want to bury the Lando Norris lead, but a lot of people have said, had Christian and Jonathan been there, surely you'd anticipate that they both would have been brinksmanship on 1000 and having a word saying, hang on, Lando Norris was over the white line. Please advise. Therefore,
no, I don't think so. I think they would have done a better job briefing Yuki. That's what they should have done, and that's what maybe could have happened. But no, there's no way that Jonathan Wheatley in the steward's office, even if he was at Red Bull, could persuade the stewards, if Yuki's just backed off much earlier and taken 10 clicks out of his car before he even hits the brakes, and don't forget how quickly these things stop just when you come out of the power, and Lando's gone off track with the DRS still open, there's no way you'd convince the stewards that was an overtaking manoeuvre. It was an avoidance manoeuvre, quite clearly. And full marks to Lando for doing that. 100% full marks. If you'd had the DRS closed, yeah, different thing, but not the way it was. Because potentially the car can get away from you to do that. And B, that he knew he can do it there. There was no culvert. There was no bump. There was nothing there. And maybe he'd done a lot of homework there before the race. Good luck to him for doing that.
Which is interesting and leads me to my next question, Peter, because it felt for the longest time that Lando Norris wasn't the guy to go away and do due diligence, that he was that he was never ever going to be able to get his starts right with any sort of consistency, and then he goes and nails Mexico 800 meters into turn one. That people said that he lacked for the clutch gene in the critical moments, that like all of the great drivers, he couldn't extract the best out of him at the critical times, and then he makes the amendment to take the delta information off of the steering wheel so that he's just in flow state in the heat of battle, and particularly in qualifying. Talk to me about Lando Norris's improvement as far as his ability to wade in the very murky waters of pressure, particularly towards the dying embers of a drivers' championship, Peter.
Well, he's not just that sort of robotic press a button and hope it works and I'll put my brain into neutral driver that some people out there think he is or was. He is methodical and he is systematic, but he's also very bright and very intelligent. And I say that because of the way his career's gone and the way he's worked at McLaren and the way he's managed to get over the Oscar factor of how quick Oscar is. And I say it also, and don't laugh at this, I say this also because if you've got enough self-belief to take a Rally 1 car between the pine forests and throw it around and look and listen at the way they run those cars, that is going to have some effect in the way you think about your own driving and your own processing of what you're doing. And I believe that's just, I'm not saying it's because of doing the rallying stuff. I'm saying it's because he's able to understand how important that is. He then translates that into doing a good job as a racing driver in a Formula One car. It's a bit like any driver. I mean, a lot of people may say this is a load of old rubbish, but they're willing to say that. But I would say any driver who has a feel for rallying and the discipline involved in being a co-driver, in being in a full-blown rally driver, in understanding how you have to react to different situations, is definitely going to have a little bit extra as a Grand Prix driver. Carlos Reutemann, reminding himself about Walter Roll's Argonal stage in Portugal just before the Dutch Grand Prix and putting the word Argonal on the steering wheel of the Williams, to me, says everything you need to say about the importance of really understanding the details of driving well. And although, as I've said before, I think Lando has a slightly sort of scatterbrained life and brain, probably, it looks that way, but at the same time, I think he is very, very detailed and very systematic and very, very bright in what he, as a racing driver. Of course, he has a lot of, as I keep saying, has a lot of lesser sides. He's never going to be as quick as Max Verstappen. He's never going to be a short corner driver. He's never going to be as organized as a Michael Schumacher or maybe even a Sebastian Vettel. But he is what he is, and he's very good. Underestimate him at your peril.
Maybe this is where I am, Mr. Windsor, because I was the one talking about Lando saying, me specifically, again, I'm bringing myself to the pulpit of truth. I was the one saying that Lando Norris doesn't sound like a champion. He doesn't look and feel like one. Talking about my priority is to be a good person, and second priority, therefore, is winning a championship. That's different for me, Peter, because Michael would never have talked like that, nor would Ayrton, nor would Lewis, nor would Max. So like, I say all that.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about this, didn't we? And this was this Vogue, was it Vogue or something? Yeah, some interview he did. But again, as I said, I think I said at the time, be very careful of those quotes because quite often they're taken out of context. And if not out of context, they're reacting to the way a question has been phrased. And that's why it's probably best not to read those interviews or listen to anything except other than watch them on the racetrack. I mean, there have been world champions that can't string two words together. It doesn't affect the way they drive. And there have been world champions who are incredibly articulate. It doesn't have any bearing on the way they drive either. So you've got to judge Lando on what he does from a Friday morning to the end of a Sunday night on any given Grand Prix weekend. And as I keep saying, yes, he has plenty of faults. And no, he's not Max, and he's not Charles Leclerc even. And he may not even be George Russell. But, I mean, he's certainly not Lewis prior to Lewis in 21. But he is very good. And you give him a good race car like an MCL 39 McLaren, and you let him have 3 or 4 years to sort of brew and come to the boil at McLaren with somebody like Zach Brown telling him how wonderful he is all the time and how he's going to win a world championship, as distinct from other team principals who perhaps wouldn't be quite as supportive of a driver. And there's no surprise at all that a guy like Lando Norris is going to win a world championship.